One of the easiest ways to ruin an otherwise perfect mushroom grow is harvesting at the wrong time, and most beginners don't realize they miss the window until it's already too late. Harvest too early and you're gonna lose yield. Alternatively, if you harvest late, you create problems that are hard to recover from. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to tell when your mushrooms are ready, how to harvest without damaging the substrate, and what should happen immediately after your first flush, when that first round of mushrooms is harvested and you want to get your monotub ready for the next round. By the end of this video, you'll be able to look at your monotub and confidently know whether it's time to harvest or whether you need to wait a little bit longer. Plus, there's one small harvesting mistake that a lot of people make that will actually really slow your next flush, so we'll fix that too. When mushrooms are approaching harvest, a few different things happen at the same time. The caps will start to flatten instead of pointing downward, and growth will speed up dramatically, sometimes doubling in size overnight. You'll open up your monotub each morning to a new surprise. Caps will be wider than you remember, stems will be longer, and your monotub is just gonna look more and more full. Now, if you look underneath the cap, you'll notice this thin membrane stretching tighter and tighter. That membrane is known as the veil, and it's the single most important indicator for knowing when your mushrooms are ready to harvest. This is the thing that really made harvest timing click for me. As the mushroom grows, the cap will eventually expand faster than the stem. That will cause this veil underneath to stretch and eventually tear. What's actually happening here is the mushroom is shifting from growth to reproduction. So as that veil tears, it naturally reveals these things underneath called gills, and those gills are what produce the spores. With the veil torn and the gills exposed, the mushroom is now going to release its spores. This is how the mycelium reproduce, and it's a surefire sign that the mushrooms have reached their full maturity. So the most ideal harvest time for these mushrooms is going to be right as that veil starts tearing, or right after it's torn completely, but before the spores actually drop. Not hours before, not days later, right around that transition time. Now, I wish I could just leave you with that and you could go off and harvest your monotub, but there is a little bit more nuance to it than that. You see, we can't just wait for one veil to tear because we might have dozens, or some people may have hundreds of mushrooms in their monotub. What if some of them are giving us the sign to harvest, but others aren't? And this is exactly where a lot of people get stuck. Some mushrooms tear their veil and just seem like they're growing way faster than everything else in your monotub, while others may take a little bit longer to grow. This is where you arrive at a little bit of a gray area, and my best recommendation is waiting till a majority of the mushrooms are kind of in that good transition phase where veils are tearing but spores aren't really dropping yet. Trying to harvest mushrooms over several days can just delay the recovery of your mycelium and prolong that second flush. I see that technique way too often, and I feel like it's just a huge mistake. When we harvest, we should harvest everything, and we should reset the surface, giving it a new blank canvas for more mushrooms to grow. Now, if we wait for a majority of the mushrooms to be ready to harvest, we will unfortunately have some of those mushrooms get harvested a little later than might be ideal. If it's just a couple, it's not a big deal. If it's an entire monotub, that's where we really run into problems. See, a lot of people always assume that bigger is better, but unfortunately, when those caps reach their maximal width, they're gonna drop spores all over your monotub. It's gonna cover the substrate. It's gonna make a mess, and trust me, they will get out of your monotub. They will get on everything around, and it's just a total pain. And the difference in size that the mushrooms gain from the time that the veil tears to when spores drop all over everything, it's pretty nominal in my opinion. It's not gonna make a huge difference. So again, once you see that veil start tearing, or once it completely tears, just go ahead and begin the harvest. Otherwise, you're gonna be spending a lot of extra time on cleanup duty. If it were up to me and maybe I'm going out of town and I have to either harvest a little bit early or harvest late, it's always going to be early. The simplicity of this step really surprised me during my first harvest. You see, you don't need any special tools or anything. When it's time to harvest, I use the good old-fashioned pull and twist method. I gently grab the mushroom near the base, apply light upward pressure, and twist slightly as I lift. Most mushrooms release cleanly from the substrate this way. If a little bit of grain or cocoa coir sticks to the base here, don't worry too much about it. You could just brush it off now or brush it off after drying. When I harvested my first mushrooms, I thought it was gonna be like pulling a plant up by the roots, and I braced myself and I gave it a quick tug, and I was surprised by how just delicately these things were moved from the surface. Now, some growers prefer using a cutting tool like a scalpel and just slice at the base of the mushroom. I feel like that leaves a little bit of the extra mushroom behind, which can sort of soften between flushes and just create like a sort of mushy, gross surface. If you're harvesting clusters, it's the same technique for harvesting single mushrooms. You're just gonna kind of grab the whole cluster, give it a little pull, a little bit of twist, and kind of gently work it free so you don't pull up a big chunk of the substrate. Remember, this isn't a race. Just take your time, move slowly, and try to keep that surface as intact as possible. Once you've done this a few times, it becomes pretty intuitive. If you actually do pull up a chunk of substrate, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. That little bit of damage to the surface may slightly delay your next flush, but it's not going to completely ruin your monotub. What about all the small mushrooms and aborts? Now, here's something that confuses almost everybody at their first harvest. After harvesting the big boys, you're going to be left with these little tiny baby mushrooms all over the place. Some of these are just little mushrooms that haven't had too much time to grow yet, and other mushrooms are known as aborts. Basically pins that stop developing once the flush has finished. The aborts will kind of stand out by their darker caps as well. These guys rarely resume growing no matter how much you try to mist or nurture your substrate. Leaving them in place isn't going to help, and it's just going to delay your next flush. So when harvesting, generally just try to harvest every mushroom, including these little fellas, these little aborts. Pick them all and just get the surface clean and ready for the next flush. And keep in mind, these aborts don't need to be just tossed. They're not wasted mycelium. They still have all the goodies of your other mushrooms. In fact, because they stop growing early, they can sometimes be more concentrated by weight than the big mushrooms. Now, what your tub looks like after harvest can be a little bit alarming if you're not expecting it. It's probably going to look a little bit rough, especially if you got ambitious and just started ripping up chunks of your substrate. There might be some small little holes where your mushrooms are growing, and your once nice, even monotub now probably looks like something a cat chewed up. And that's completely normal. Healthy mycelium is surprisingly resilient, and this is just sort of the in-between purgatory phase before your next flush. It's gonna look worse before it looks better. Don't panic too much. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just part of the process. What matters now is allowing the mycelium to recover and rehydrate, which I'm gonna cover in a future video. So as a sort of recap, before harvesting, there's a few key questions that you should be asking yourself. Are the veils tearing or stretched thin? Are the caps flattening? And are most of the mushrooms showing these signs? If the answer to these questions is a resounding yes, then it's harvest time. I actually still remember how excited I was after my first harvest. After like 6 months of trying to grow these things, I was like, with some rice, some coco coir, this plastic tub, and a little bit of patience, I was able to grow this thing. I created life. I created life. I've already told this story before, but then I stored my mushrooms all wrong and they rotted. But for a brief moment, I was the man. Harvesting your mushrooms is probably going to feel intimidating. It's taken a lot of work to get them to this point, and the last thing you want to do is mess it up now. But hopefully after watching this video, you feel more confident in your ability to go out there and successfully harvest these things. After we pick the surface clean, we need to preserve this harvest by properly dehydrating and storing the mushrooms, which I'll cover in the next video. But for today, that will do. As always, thanks for watching and happy growing.